If I could introduce then our main speaker this evening is Clancy I from the Pacific Group in Los Angeles. Thank you, Clancy.
My name is Clancy Immeslin. I'm an alcoholic. Get a little water. I'm glad to be here tonight. I'm glad to be sober. I had kind of an interesting trip on the way over here. I went to London, and some friends from South Africa took me to the theater Monday night. Came all the way from South Africa. I thought that was nice of them. And Tuesday night I was in Newbridge with all the Irish boys. They're a bad bunch, I'll tell you. Bad cess to you, and all you belong to you. And Thursday night I was in Bristol or Belfast. I told them that the people of the Republic were plotting against them. They should fight back. But it wasn't a bad trip. I've had few bad trips. I think I've mentioned it here once before, but a while back I went to Iceland to talk, which is from Los Angeles. It's about 1,000 miles beyond any lengths. It is a long way to go up in Iceland. And on the way back, it was Sunday, and I was tired, and it's a long trip. You have to take Air Iceland, which is a bad plane, and then you get to Minneapolis in Minnesota. And I was sitting in the Minneapolis airport and had to wait about 4 hours for a flight to Los Angeles. And I finally had to go to the bathroom, and I went to I was in something called a red carpet room, which is the United Airlines frequent flyer room. And I went in their bathroom. It was a nice little bathroom, 2 little stalls side by side. And I sat in one of them pensively thinking. And we're sitting there, and all of a sudden a voice from the other side said, "Hi there." I think it can't be me. He said, "What are you doing tonight?" I said, "I better get this settled right away." I said, "I'm going back to Los Angeles to my wife and children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, actually. But I really appreciate your asking. I hope you're having a good day here." I thought that'd do it. There was a long pause, and the voice said, "We could really have some fun tonight if you wanted to." And I was tired. I overreacted. I said, "Look, pal, I don't know what your problem is or what your situation is, but why don't you just do what you're in here to do and let me alone?" There was a long pause, and the voice said, "I'll have to call you back. This idiot in the next stall won't shut up." Yeah. That's a bad trip. But I was thinking tonight, this has been a very nice weekend. Enjoyed our 16-minute speakers last night. They both were very good. Mark and Eileen, who gave a fine talk this morning on the history of AA, and the 2 boys tonight, David and Aiden. And it's an amazing thing. We all come from absolutely different backgrounds. Absolutely. As the book says, we are people who would not ordinarily get together. That certainly is true, just absolutely differently. And I come from a different one. The 2 speakers tonight came from both from alcoholic homes. It seems like when you go to AA meetings, people always either come from alcoholic homes or they've been inappropriately touched when they were children or something. And I think about my life. The only alcoholic in my home, the whole family was me, so I can't really blame my family. And the only person that ever inappropriately touched me when I was young was me. So I can't really lay it off on anybody to speak of. But in some ways, I grew up in the middle of the United States, up in northern Wisconsin, and it's a cold climate. In a Norwegian Lutheran milieu, surrounded by them. When we talked about England, we talked about our ancestors coming here and raping and pillaging and burning, and that cheered us up a little. But I was raised in a very strict church. I didn't know it was a strict church. The only church I knew, and I was raised very structured. And I was raised and confirmed and catechized. The Norwegian Lutheran Church seemed to be only had 2 rules. You don't sin, and you stay away from Catholics. Which seems all right to me till I became one and married the other. But when I was a boy, I always felt a little guilty because I felt I was a Norwegian Lutheran, but I seemed to need more fun than other kids for some reason. And I broke some sins, broke some of the 10 Commandments. Some Sundays I didn't always go to church if I could help it. And I didn't always remember to honor my mother and father. And so I sometimes used bad words. And I always felt a little bad. But I was doing all right. And I read a lot, so I was shoved ahead in school a couple times. And that time they didn't have special schools. They shove you ahead till you're to a reading level with where you were. And I was getting straight A's in school and doing well. And when I was 12 years old, something happened that just seemed so incredible. Eileen mentioned it in her life a little bit. My parents got divorced. What's the big deal about that? What's wrong with being a parent getting divorced? But if you could imagine this, at the age of 12, I never heard of a divorce. There was none in our church, none in our family ever. Someone explained it to me, but I didn't like it. And after that, I instinctively did the worst type of thing a guy like me can do. If I could have selected, I couldn't have found a better way, worse way. I began playing my mother against my father to avoid structure, discipline. When my mother would come down on me, I'd run to my father. My father came down on me, I'd run to my mother. When they both came down on me, I'd run to my grandma. And I fooled him again and again and again and again. By the time I was 15, had fooled him so much I was flunking out of high school. I had no friends left. I was just a bitter little snot is what I was. And just a wretched little kid. And I didn't like anybody or anything, and I made sure they didn't like me. And I just had turned I guess I needed structure to live. And I don't know what would have become of me. I think I would have gone to a penitentiary, or I would have been in some deep problem because I was heading that way. And what saved me was World War II. About that same time, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and I got interested in the war, and I started going to movies, seeing about the war and watching John Wayne kill Japs and doing things, and I really got involved in it. And as things were getting so bad in high school, I was going to maybe be expelled. I thought what I should do is be a war hero. And so I decided to join the Marine Corps and go out and kill Japs. And I didn't know how to do that, so in the middle of Wisconsin, so I thought I'll go to San Francisco. I read about that, and I didn't know how to get there. A guy gave me a ride. I told my mother I wanted to go up in northern Wisconsin to visit my aunt, and she packed my little bag and gave me bus fare. And I got a guy to give me a ride to Minneapolis. And I said, I want to hitchhike to San Francisco. I never hitchhiked. He said, you got to stand here and try it. So and I was about this tall with a face full of pimples and dumber than anybody could be. And the car stops. He says, where are you going, kid? I said, San Francisco. He said, so am I. Hop in. And away we went. And he was in the Navy going back to his ship in San Francisco, and he drove me almost 2,000 miles. We'd stop at night. There weren't any motels then, but he'd get me a bed in a trailer court, and he bought my meals, and I'd listen to me prattle. He must have been a saint. I never hitchhiked before. I didn't know. I thought you tell people where you want to go, and they take you there. What do I know? And I told him, I want to go there in the Marine Corps, and good Billy something. He said, you're a little small kid. You can't be in the Marine Corps. They won't ever take you. He said, I'll suggest you're 15. What you do, I'll take you to the Coast Guard office in San Francisco. You tell them you're 16. Tell them you want to be in the Merchant Marine, the Merchant Service. And they're crying for men because everybody's gone to the good and has gone to the Navy. So he took me there, and I went in, and he left. I said, I want to be in the Merchant Marine. I said, all right, fill out this application. And I filled it out, and I put down 16, as he had told me to do. He said, well, you're only 16, kid. You have to have your parents' permission. So I took it around the block, got my parents' permission. And how desperate they gave me Siemens papers right there. And he sent another guy and I down to Union Hall where we signed some papers for dues, whatever the hell they were, and took us to the Embarcadero and put us on a big ship. And that afternoon, we were on our way to the South Pacific, carrying a load of torpedo warheads. And it really, as I've said many times, it was really fun for about an hour. I saw where the World's Fair was last year, and I saw Alcatraz, and I saw the Golden Gate Bridge, and after that, there was just nothing. And I was on the ship, and these guys were there. They said they were going to put me in a cabin. I don't know if you know what a cabin is. In Wisconsin, a cabin has got logs in it. This was just a room with 3 of the worst type of guys that any young, dumb Norwegian Lutheran kid can be with. And these people are called men. They say, what the hell are you supposed to be? I could see there was some tension. I told them a joke that I was used to go over good in high school. Didn't go over good there. I said, why don't you shut up and get your bunk? That's your bunk. And I remember crawling in that bunk, and the ship was moving like this. And it was hot. And oh, God, I wanted my mother. But I didn't want to say anything and ruin my image. And these guys start talking, and I never heard talk like that before. I realized I'm in the room with sinners. I mean, big-time sinners. Big-time sinners. They've been in San Francisco for 3 days doing terrible things with women. And I don't want to give the wrong impression. Even at the age of 15, I'd had sex, but I'd been apprehensive, and I'd been afraid, and I'd been alone. And these guys were doing it with women. I couldn't believe my ears. But of course, I realized, I looked at it, of course, they've all got black hair. Those are the Catholics they warned me about. But I got a role on that ship. I became the ship fool. Hey, kid, go out to the engine room. Tell them we need a left-handed wrench. Hey, kid, go up on the bridge. Tell the captain we need some elbow grease. They'd all laugh, and I'd, And what they'd do at the end of their watches every time, they'd drink whiskey. They all had whiskey with them. They weren't supposed to have them on the ship, but nobody's going to stop these guys. There was no discipline. Any other era, they'd have been pirates, you know. Ha, 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 ha. And they'd drink whiskey, and I'd lie in my bunk and I'd never been in a room with a bottle of whiskey. And one day, one of these guys turned to me with this bottle of whiskey and said, all right, kid, you think you're man enough for a little snort? And I drew the line there. I might be young and dumb, but I am a Norwegian Lutheran. And I decided to just demolish him. I was going to say, you get that bottle out of my face. I guess you don't know I'm a Norwegian Lutheran. You can push me around, but you won't ever make me do any sins. You Catholics are all the same. I know that. I promised my mother and grandmother I never drink whiskey, and I never will. And don't you ever put that whiskey in my face again. I was just going to tell him that. He says, well, you think you're man enough? And I heard a voice say, goddamn right. So I had my first drink of whiskey out of the first bottle I was ever close to, and burned my mouth and my throat and my stomach and my throat and my mouth and his shirt finally. And it was just terrible, because they'd laugh at you. Ha, 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 get the bottle away, little son of a bitch. Ha, 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 ha. And I just wanted to hit him, but I couldn't, obviously. I lay in my bed and just writhed. And so what I did all the way across the Central Pacific, when nobody was looking, at least once a day, I'd go to one of these guys' sea bags and take out a bottle of whiskey and drink it. And then I'd throw it up, and I'd have to wipe it up. But I wanted so desperately, I thought, if I wouldn't have thrown up that whiskey, they would have thought I was a man. Of course, nothing would have made them think I was a man, but I didn't know that. And we were finally coming into Pearl Harbor on the night before my 16th birthday, and I had a drink of that crap again one more time, and it stayed down. Then I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to do. I want to explain something. That was a long time ago. This is World War II. Most of you weren't even born. How do I remember it so well? I don't remember it. But I got a tape of me when I was 3 years sober when I did remember it. I'm just quoting my tape. And that terrible stuff had stayed down, and all of a sudden I found myself feeling significantly better. And I just thought that's why they drink. It makes you feel better. I didn't think anything about it. I've always envied people who have breakthroughs and have great understandings. Heard a guy a while back, he said, when I held that first drink of whiskey down, I knew I'd gone into a new garden of experience, with flowers and fruits to be savored in the coming years. until the flowers and fruit soured in my lips. And I left that garden to come to this even more wonderful garden where I intend to spend the rest of my life. And I remember thinking, Jesus, I wish I'd known that. All I learned was if you don't puke and you can breathe, it makes you feel very good. That's what I learned. And I didn't become a terrible alcoholic. Next day they took me to Honolulu, got me 2-3 bottles of beer, and I got kind of tipsy. They thought it was funny, and I thought it was funny. And from then on, I learned to drink a little bit. I didn't pay much attention to it. On that same ship, I learned to smoke. You know, nobody in my family smoked, but they all smoked, so I smoked and puked and smoked and puked. And one day I smoked and didn't puke, and I smoked 2.5 or 3 packs a day, every day for the next 40-some years. And I had to stop finally because through a series of combinations, I had some problems with my vocal cords. It wasn't caused by smoking. I tried to quit smoking a lot, but I loved to smoke. And the doctor kept saying, you know, for you to smoke is to die. Yeah. He only had to tell me once, for you to smoke, you may go mute. That was the end of my smoking. But I'm a smoker by nature. I think if somebody told me I had 30 days to live, I'd shoot over and get a carton of cigarettes. I mean, I don't yearn for them, but they're great. And it hurts me the way smokers are treated today. It just hurts you, you know. You go down the street and outside of every building, there's some boobs out there in the rain just can't go inside, can't smoke anywhere, can't do anything. Not only that, we were talking to Ireland the other night, people think they have the right to come up and denounce you, you know. Why do you smoke? Don't you realize you have secondhand smoke? That may kill us all. What's wrong with you? And they were doing that when I was smoking. I finally thought of an answer to that question, but then I had to stop smoking, so I'd never had a chance to use it much. But for all of you smokers tonight, I'm going to give you something you wouldn't hear in any other AA meeting tonight in the world. An answer to people who stick their noses in about your smoking. When someone comes up to you and says, why do you smoke? Here's what you say. Why do I smoke? I have a feeling that one of these days they'll find a market for phlegm and I'll be rich. They'll never ask you again, I'll tell you that. But later on, when I got a little older, I went for 17, I went in the United States Navy for the rest of the war. At the end of the war, I was in a naval hospital up in Northern California being sewed together. And they passed around some tests. I've always been good on tests, so I did very well. And they gave me an honorary high school diploma. So I was able, after the war, to go back to the University of Wisconsin, the first class of veterans after the war, and go to university. And I had a great time in the university, drank and raised hell. We all had a lot of fun. And when people gave us hell, we'd say it was all due to the war, not our fault. And I met a girl with black hair and black eyes, just flashing romantic. And I'd never seen anyone so romantic. And she won my heart. Then she dropped the big one. She says, I'm a Catholic. And I didn't know what to do about that. I couldn't take her home. But she won my heart. We got married, and my grandmother cried for about 2 years every time she saw me. But I'd won some trophies at the University of Wisconsin in athletics. And I went out in the world. I became a sports writer, newspaper sports writer, which is still my favorite job I've ever had. But then my wife began manifesting the behavior pattern of Catholics, which I never knew about, and no Lutheran kid ever does know about. And if you're a Protestant boy and you fall in love with a nice, good Catholic girl, I'm going to tell you some news you may not know. You're going to have a big family, whether you want one or not. And I became a national distributor of small Catholics. Just, boom, boom, boom. And so I had to get better jobs. I got a job in a big corporation in the advertising department, and I got in some advertising agencies. And I did rather well because I've had a flair for writing. And all these years I drank, because drinking always makes me feel good. I didn't know what it was, but I'll tell you what alcohol does. Alcohol makes bad things good and good things better, and it just makes you feel good. Because most of my life I've had some emotional problems, it seemed like. But even when I was a kid, I remember thinking, there's something missing in me. I get along with people at a distance, but up close I don't get along very well. And I don't fit in very well with groups sometimes. I always thought, because I was younger than everybody else, but I don't feel part of. But I discovered that alcohol changes that. It makes me feel part of, makes me feel whatever I want to be. And I loved it. If you're new tonight, I want to tell you some strange news. Alcohol is the best friend I ever had. Friends come and go, lovers come and go, jobs come and go, states come and go. But when a few drinks, it's just doing that for you. As I often thought, for people like us, it has a sound effect that most people don't have. You just thought, and the only problem I ever had is I have a tendency sometimes to drink a little too much. Or as my psychiatrist told me, I have many times been thoughtlessly overserved. And when I drink too much, I act a little bizarrely. And my psychiatrist says, I was going to a psychiatrist because I was sensitive. And he said, that's because you were repressed as a child. And alcohol is enabling you to break through these walls. I remember telling that to a cop one night who was arresting me. And his answer was, get in the car, asshole. Yeah. But I have a tendency to get a little bizarre. So some friends of mine said, they got this new thing in town called Alcoholics Anonymous. And some of the old town drunks are even cutting down their drinking there. Why don't you go there? So I said, okay. I'm going to my first meeting, 1949, a long time ago. And 8 fat old guys sitting around a table, about. And this one guy said, what the hell do you want? I thought, wow, this is like being back on the old ship again, And I didn't understand why he was so defensive. I know now, because I was 22 and looked younger, and there wasn't anybody under 40 at that time in that state. And it's like somebody 12 years old who came in tonight and say, I want the program. No, you don't. Here's what you want. And I said, well, some people suggested I come here. He said, you think you're an alcoholic? And I said, no, I don't. He said, what the hell do you think's wrong with you? And I tried to be honest. I said, I think I'm too sensitive. He said, ha, 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 listen to this, Earl. I never said that again for a long time, I'll tell you. But I went to meetings there for a while, and if you're new tonight, it doesn't take long to discover what A is about. And alcoholics, it's no big mystery. Alcoholics are people whose problem is alcohol. And they get too much problems with alcohol, they come to Alcoholics Anonymous, where they confess their problem is alcohol. And then they return to God and help others and feel good from then on. And that, I guess that helps them. It wouldn't help me, but it helped them. Because my problem is not alcohol. And you hear these stories they tell. Once you drink, you can't stop. You must continue to the end. Too bad. I can stop anytime. I did that for years. I can stop anytime. My problem is not stopping. My problem is after I stop, in the next day or 2 or 3 or 4, somebody seems to sneak into my bedroom in the middle of the night and put an invisible spring in my gut. And the next day they tighten it. And it doesn't come out as, I need a drink. It comes out as just a little growing restlessness, just a little irritability, just a little tired of the sermon, what I did last month, get off it. And a little tired of this crap, taking it home, and at home work gets to be a little dull too. And if you have any children, they make a lot of noise. And I've discovered I've spent a lot of money. I spent thousands of dollars in psychoanalysis to beat that feeling. And I read books, and I did a lot of things. But I'll tell you how you beat that feeling. You take 2 or 3 drinks. That's how you beat it. And so I don't drink because I'm a drinker. I drink because I'm a feeler. And then sometimes, unfortunately, I drink a little too much again. Then they say, see, your problem was alcohol, wasn't it? You have to say, yeah, I guess it was. But inside you just want to scream, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. You don't understand. Nobody does understand at all. There's just something wrong with where I am, what I'm doing or something. And so and then they talk about returning to God. By this time, I had broken 6 or 7 commandments, and I was not quite ready to return to God. I've always envied those people who come to AA and say things like, I've been searching for God for 30 years. I never searched for God once. He slowly circles the Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and he's looking for me. And if he finds me, I'm screwed. And so I did a lot of things. But I went to AA for a while, then I left it because my problem is not alcohol. I'm not going to return to God. That religious crap doesn't help me. And I got a job in a different city, big corporation called, where I worked in the advertising department. And I was doing pretty well, and they called me in. They said, Emerson, you're doing a nice job, but you're gone sometimes on Mondays, and sometimes you come smelling like booze. We can't have that. And I said, I understand that. And I had an idea that changed my life. It was just on the spur of the moment, changed my life. The same thing, I said, downtown, Mr. Carlson, they have a new thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've heard about it. And I guess maybe I have a drinking problem. And I'll go down there and get cured. Would you work with me for a couple of weeks till I get cured? He said, sure, good idea. So I went down there and sat in these hideous meetings, the same old dreary crap and their lousy old steps and their old traditions. Turn it over to God. Ha, 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 ha. I mean, I used to sit and envy these people. God, I wish I'd have been stupid like you. I would really help here, but I can see through this, unfortunately. And at that time, you could go home and talk to your wife and say, well, I've gone back to AA, honey. Wonderful, wonderful. What do they want you to do, sweetheart? They want me to taper off. And there wasn't any Al-Anon then to screw it up for everybody. Ever since the birth of Al-Anon, there's never been any rest for anybody, anywhere, anytime. No, they don't want you to taper off. You're supposed to stop completely. I go to the program, too. We have the steps, and we know about the program. I release you, you son of a bitch. But when I'd take some time off, the company would pay me to get cured. And by that time, I'd be looking for a new job, and I'd find a new job. And I did that again and again and again. When I got in trouble, I'd give them the AA game, and nobody knew much about AA. You could always play that card, and I'd get another job. And all my kids been born in different states where it's going to be different, never was. And I went up and down and up and down. I became quite successful sometimes and had a lot of bad breaks and misunderstandings and tried to control my drinking. Got to work at that. Sometimes when you're new, you look around, you make, I'm sure there's some new people here. And what have I got in common with these people? What have I got in common with these people? Different sizes and shapes and colors, and they all drink differently, they all come from different backgrounds, what have I got in common with them? And there's not a lot, apparently, you have in common. I was sitting there tonight, looking over the crowd, thinking, I don't have anything in common with these people. And I saw this gentleman who's a Sikh, and I thought, I'm not a Sikh, I'm not anything. What have I got to do with anybody here? That's how I would have thought that way many years ago. And one of the things, when I was new, the first 2 weeks I went to AA, a guy said, read this book, Alcoholics Anonymous. So I read it, and I was impressed. It was the dullest book I ever read. And some years later, when I came off Skid Row and read it again, it had got even more dull. I write impressive things like, do this action, buy this product, take this to blah, blah, blah. And you read that book, and just, if you are thorough at this stage of your development. And I've read the book a couple times. And in Los Angeles, they read chapter 5, and they read sometimes chapter 3, and I've heard chapter 3 read in several meetings, just a dull chapter. And one day after I was sober, I accidentally was listening, and I had nothing else to think about for a while. And it suddenly struck me, in chapter 3, the first page and a half of chapter 3 is the story of people like us. If you can find nothing else a comparative, that's the beginning. And what do they talk about? They talk about, they say that people of our type, alcoholics of our type, have one among things we have in common. We all, somewhere along the way, have adopted or taken on, voluntarily or involuntarily, the obsession that somehow, someday, I will control and enjoy my drinking. And it says the persistence of this illusion is astonishing. And people like us give it all we got. I'll tell you, I did. Because I just know if dummies can drink, I can drink. And people that work for me can drink, and my gardener can drink. Why can't I drink? It's just I got to find a way to do it. And it talks about the things we do. Talks about we have occasional brief recoveries. And I've had that. I'm sure you have too. Oh, I eat before I go out. That's it. That's what I do. But that doesn't work either. Followed always by still worse relapse. And then you get to a little phrase in there that's just such a tasty little phrase when you think about it. We fight the alcohol, and we reach a stage of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. I remember reading that thinking, boy, that's really drunk when you get like that. But that is when you're drunk. That's how you feel after you get sober again. Pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, and they want some explanation for you about what you've been doing, and I can't think of any, and the only answer I know is, leave me alone, damn it! Get away from me! Leave me alone! And I stopped drinking again until I need just a few drinks to tide me over. And then I eventually blow up again, and they want to know again. And then there's a little paragraph that we've all heard, probably, that what people like us do. We change from one kind of booze to another. Or we drink beer only. God, a lot of people have done that. I'll just drink beer, I'll be all right. I'll only drink wine, that's another good one. I'll take physical exercise, and there's a whole little paragraph of things. I'll read spiritual literature. I'll voluntarily assign going to an asylum. I'll take a trip. I'll not take a trip. I'll do, all. And it says we could increase the list ad infinitum forever. And most of us have done that. And year after year, I've fought that. And this worst part about it is, they always say, for you, if you're an alcoholic, you can't drink. But sometimes I could drink and get away with it. And I'm sure you could too. If it were bad every time, you wouldn't do it quite very long. But once in a while, have a good time, have fun, feel like you're something, go home, everything's great. But some other times, God, I stop for a drink and don't get home till 3 in the morning, and my little girl is sitting up saying, Daddy, you said you'd be home tonight for my birthday. And I thought maybe something had happened to you. Then you just want to cut your arm off. And then tomorrow night you have a few drinks to get rid of that feeling, and on and on. But I finally went down in Dallas, Texas. I was working there in a big place, and I had some good jobs there, but I was really missing work down. They finally fired me. And I'll tell you, the position I'd gotten to, they called my wife a day before they fired me to tell her. Her name at that time was Poor Charlotte. Everybody knew Poor Charlotte. And they called her and said, we're let him go, and you should know about it, and we think you should take the children and leave. And she did. Sold the furniture the next day when I was being fired and moved. I never know where she went. And I got home, and I'd been evicted from my home. The company had taken my car back. I got no severance checks. I'd taken some loans from the company and didn't pay them back. And I stood at a street corner with 2 suitcases, and I thought, this can't be happening to me. I'm a talented guy. And I knew I had to get out of that state because I was kind of on probation from the state hospital through a series of bad breaks. And some guy said, you want to drive a car for me to Los Angeles? I said, you bet I do, pal. I want to get out of here. So I got this car, and I drove as far as El Paso, 300 miles the first night, and had some friends there, went to Juarez, Mexico, and got drunk, and had a wonderful time. Came back. Next day, I got my car and drove to Phoenix, Arizona, got drunk, lost the car. Never did find it. I haven't found it yet. All my clothes, all my ID, all my money, what little money I had was in that car. And I was on the street corner that night, and I was getting in a beef with the cop. I said, help me find my car. He said, I can't do it right now. Come on, that's what you're supposed to do. And he threw me in jail overnight. I've been in jail a lot overnight. I have a tendency, when I drink a certain amount, to counsel police officers, and I go to jail. And in the middle of the night, I woke up as Phoenix, Arizona, hot place, and it wasn't air conditioned at that time, but up on the third floor, this must have been 120 up there, and so sick, and I had to vomit. Oh, God, I vomited. I thought it was the toilet. Turned out to be a guy's bunk is what it was. And he wasn't in it, so it was all right. And that made me feel better, and I lay down, put my cheek on the tile, and went to sleep. I felt better down. He came back from wherever he was. He was a trustee of some court. He said, "You drunken bastard, you vomited my car." Boom, boom. And he started kicking at me and kicked my front teeth out. And that was one of the few mornings I was glad I'd been in psychoanalysis. I was almost instantly able to identify his problem. I remember thinking, this son of a bitch is overreacting. But I didn't want to say anything to make trouble. And the next morning, they let me out, and I hit the street in a strange town where I didn't know anybody, and sick, and vomit, and blood, and crap, and my clothes were torn, and I couldn't give anybody who would accept a collect phone call from me. It got kind of bad by this time. So what do you do at a time like that? If you plan on being a long-term slipper, here's your tip. Whenever it gets so bad you can't stand it, go to an AA club. That's the only place in the world where the worse you look, the better they like it. Oh, look at Jim, this one's mine. Now found where the Phoenix Arid Club was. I went over there and hustled some old lady for $20. I told her, I want to get into a 12-step house and find sobriety. She says, this will help you. You bet. And I ran downtown, took a bus ticket to Los Angeles. And there was a guy in Los Angeles, a big star at that time, and I'd given him his start, and I called him up. He was a big radio star. And I said, Ted, I've had a terrible accident. My car smashed and demolished. I've got my teeth knocked out. I have no clothes. Could you help me? He said, sure. Come out to the station right now. And he told me how to get out there in the bus on Hollywood Boulevard, down upstairs to the KFWB, and there was Ted. And he was shocked when he saw me. He said, oh, you poor guy. And he gave me, I think, almost a couple $100. I said, Jesus, Ted, thanks. Now, I had fun for another few days. People were didn't want to stand too close to me in bars, but I was having fun. And then I ran out of money again, and I called him up and said, Ted, my check hasn't come yet. Could you help me one more time? He said, I called Dallas. You haven't had any car accident. You're a bum. Everybody in Dallas is tired of you, and I'm tired of you too. Don't come around here. I said, Jesus, Ted, I'm so sick. I'm so sick. Wouldn't you, for old time's sake, I gave you a start. Please help me. He said, okay, last time. You come to the back tonight. Don't come up the stairs on Hollywood Boulevard. Come to the alley behind it and stand out there at 9 o'clock, and I'll come out on the fire escape, and I'll see you. But don't ever come back here again. So I was out there that night in the rain, cold, and he came out, and he threw a $5 bill. He said, now stay away from here. And it fluttered down to a mud puddle, and I crawled out and got that, and went down the street. And a couple of days later, I found myself in a position that a person like me can't be in. Two big guys were throwing me out of a Skid Row mission. I said, and stay out of here, you bum. And I tried to explain to him, I'm not a bum. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I wrote, the L.C. Nelmer ads for the board company, were running that very week in Life and Time and the New Yorker. I've had my picture in the New York Times for one of my achievements. But these things are hard to explain in midair. And I stood outside of that mission on a cold, rainy morning, and I had a terrible feeling. I didn't know what the feeling was. I know what it is now because I've seen people have it. I suddenly realized there's no friendly direction. There's no direction that's more friendly than any other direction. There's no place where they're going to be glad to see you. My own mother up in Wisconsin, I wasn't even allowed to call her anymore because my stepfather was so tired of watching me play on her emotions when I got in trouble. She'd go down to her tiny little bank account and take a few more dollars and send it to her little boy. He just told her, I guess he's dead. He can't, and he'd interrupt the calls. And I could never get through. I couldn't find anybody. And I thought, I'm going to die on this street. I was down to about 125 pounds and these dirty clothes and torn and sick and unshaven. And I finally said to some guy, Jesus, pal, where's the AA club here? He said, well, it's corner of Wilshire and Fairfax. I said, where the hell is that? He said, well, Wilshire doesn't come down this far. You have to go up this street to Hill Street, cut over to Hill Street, walk west on Wilshire till you come to Fairfax. I said, okay, and away I went. And I had no idea how far it was. I found out, I measured my car some years later, 7.5 miles. That's a long way to walk in the rain. And my mouth was bleeding, and I was sick, and I wanted to throw up. But anybody who's been in that situation knows when you have no alternative, you do what you have to do, whatever it is. You do what you have to do. And I got to this. I remember still walking up Wilshire Boulevard, all those fancy stores and all these things, and in the rain, people coming by in their cars in the rain and pointing and laughing at this idiot over there. I got to this club, it's the same old crap, you know. Hi, you're home, son. Oh, Jesus. Are you going to tell me to pray? Maybe that'll help. And I lurked around that club trying to stay out of sight all day, and at night they had a meeting. I had about 4 pounds of cake because I could eat the cake, could chew that. Then they had a meeting on gratitude, and I almost threw it up again, just, oh, yeah. Then everybody went home, and I was there. Just the manager and I were left. I thought, if I go up in the rain and sleep in the sidewalk, I'm going to die. So I thought, I better put on my newcomer look. Hi, I'm a newcomer, and I have no place to stay, and it's raining and cold. Can you help me? He said, yeah, you're in luck, kid. A guy named Joe Quinn left a 49 Merc in the parking lot last summer. It doesn't run, but it's dry. You can sleep in that. You want me to sleep in an abandoned car in an A club parking lot? She says, yeah, good deal, huh? Yeah, that's a good deal. And I vaguely remember sleeping in that car, still cold, and my mouth started bleeding, and I was sick. And I thought, God. And I got up in the morning, it was Sunday morning, and I went to the club at 8 o'clock. They opened early, and I had some, and they had a spiritual meeting. I had about 4 pounds of their cake and had some coffee, and then they had talked about God for an hour. And I thought, oh, man, I can't stand this. And I lurked around there. That night there was another meeting, and the manager of the club says, you know, you can't, you're not supposed to be in here during the daytime without being a member. But you're such a mess, you can be. But 3 things you got to do. You can't make any smart remarks around here, and you damn smart remarks. You can't ask anybody for money, and you have to go to a meeting every night. I thought, oh, man. Just till it stops raining, I'll be out of here like a rocket, wherever I'm going to go. And it just kept raining. I remember laying in that car on Monday night, cold and sick. I think, maybe I'm dead. Maybe this is what hell is. Maybe hell is not fire and brimstone. Maybe it's just you feel bad all the time, and your mouth bleeds every so often. And everywhere you go, behind you hear people ridicule you and making fun of you and laughing at you and saying how much badly you smell. And that week I went to meetings and lurked around that club and just hated. Occasionally guys would buy me something soft that I could eat. And that was my sobriety date. I never would have guessed that'd be my sobriety date. I didn't want to be sober. That third tradition, the only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. I had no desire to stop drinking at all. Because stopping drinking to me is bad, worse than that. And I knew that because once upon a time I'd really given it all I had. I was in one of my overnight sessions in jail. And I came out in the morning, and I had got down to an art by this time. I had to go home, take a shower, and change clothes and go to work. And the guy was waiting for me. He said, oh, you should have stayed home last night. I know, I'm going to get off this booze. Just bad cop is what it was. He said, but you should have stayed home because your little son died and we couldn't find you. And it almost made me crazy because I had a bunch of little girls and one little boy, and he was the apple of my eye. His name was John Imslin. And I thought, oh, my God, I just couldn't stand it. And we went up to Wisconsin to bury him. And I remember still remember sitting in my father-in-law's house. He was a farmer, and he had 2 big sons. They were farmers. And they were so kind. And we sat there and drank coffee. He said, oh, Clancy, have some more pastry. Here, have some more coffee. And they were so kind to me. But in their eyes, you could just see, you dirty bastard, you dirty, rotten bastard, what do you do to our sister, you know? And I felt so bad. And we buried him. Before we buried him, when no one's around, I put my hand in his casket. I said, John Imslin, this will never happen again. If my drinking gets bad, I will quit, and I'll do it in your name. And I went back to Texas where I was working, and I watched it for a while, but of course it always got bad again. And then all of a sudden, my wife reminded me, and I reminded me, I promised John this wouldn't happen. And I stopped drinking. And I stopped drinking altogether. I did it for my little dead son, John. And it really made me feel elated that I was able to do something for him and relieve some of my guilt is almost like Easter. Somebody died for my sins, and I started coming home at night. And I played with my daughters, and we did things, and we talked about little John at dinner time, and we went on weekends, we'd do things, and it was just wonderful. And all in the name of little John, until one night, somebody snuck into my bedroom and put an invisible spring in my gut. And the next morning it started. Just a little tension now, a little restlessness. And as it got worse day after day, I had a new focus. It's this stinking God who took my little son who never committed a sin and killed him to punish me because I'm a sinner. Screw you! And I just made me crazy to get worse. And my job, I didn't seem to, hate to go to work in the morning, and my daughters would come home and, Mary, please take your sisters and go to your room. For Christ's sake, let me alone. And I just hated myself for being like that. I needed a couple of drinks and I couldn't get them. And it got so bad, one day my wife took the girls to Mass, and I just pulled the car in the garage and hooked up a hose in the exhaust pipe and turned the motor and went to sleep and died. And the guy next door just happened to be drinking coffee in his coffee nook and saw me go in there and heard the motor running, and I didn't come out, so he ambled over and found me dead in the car and pulled me out, and they beat on my chest and breathed in my mouth and rushed me to the hospital and oxygenated me and examined me for about 3 or 4 days and determined I was seriously mentally ill and committed me to the state insane asylum for an indefinite period. Now that's how I get when I stop drinking, folks. That is not a goal of mine, I'll tell you. And I had good reasons to not drink, but I've thought about that many times since, that I was diagnosed as an intense schizophrenic, or the dual personality. And I like to go back and find that psychiatrist someday. He must be about 95 now. I could move him around pretty good, Call me a schizophrenic, you idiot. If I could have got my personalities down to 2, I'd have been all right. My problem has always been this group that gathers in my head every time there's any problem. Let's get out of here. I don't think we could. Look around. I don't know. I used to hear people say today, I'm not sure the program's enough for me. I may need group therapy. Not me. I just go for a ride alone in my car. Never thought of that. That's what's so good about alcohol. Alcohol reduces it to one voice. It may be a bad voice, but it's one voice. Why don't you quit your job and punch that guy in the face? Why not? And it's hard later to remember what your reasons were for doing that. But that's what happened when I stopped drinking. I had no goal. I'm sleeping in an abandoned car, people ridiculing me every day. I feel like crap. I already know all about AA. I know more about AA than the people in there. I could quote the book better than some of them. And how in the world would I stay sober? And it was an amazing thing. There was a guy in there that I'd seen in the movies. He was a movie actor. And I thought, a movie actor. That means you're rich. I wonder if you'd like to have a new friend. He didn't. But they started doing the same old stuff the old timers always do. Get a sponsor. You better get a sponsor, boy. So I got old Bob to be my sponsor. I certainly admire your program. Would you be my sponsor? I said, sure, kid. I want you to do what I tell you. Oh, sure, Bob. And I found out later he'd only been in 3 movies. He wasn't much of a movie actor at all. He just was a character actor. I've been in more movies than he ever was, with better roles. But they said he wasn't a very good actor, but he was, because he could act decently at meetings. And that took a lot of acting for him, I'll tell you, because he turned out to be a right-wing fascist AA pig of the worst sort. Do this, do that. I used to think, why am I taking this crap from this guy? I'm smarter than he is, that dummy. The reason I took that crap was because he was my only meal ticket out of there that I could see. I might get some dough out of him somehow. And I stayed sober. And people said, I said I didn't have a desire to stop drinking. You know what my desire was? It's a terrible motive. I wanted to stay sober long enough so I could hustle this guy to buy me some teeth and some clothes. And I'd go back to New York to a big agency, and I'd say, yes, I know I had this bad run of luck with my drinking, Tracy Locke, other places, but I've learned my lesson now, and I'm not going to drink anymore, and I'd like a job. They'd say, we can't trust you. I say, I'll work for nothing. I'll work for nothing till you think you can pay me. And I'll knock him dead. And they'll may pay me some big dough finally. And I'll save my money. I'll come back to Los Angeles someday, and I'll buy the AA club. And someday when they're having an all groups meeting in there, I'll lock the door and set it on fire. And I'll just laugh. When I saw the movie Carrie some years later, that's why I want to pour blood on him too. Here. Not much of a motive to stay sober, but it worked. And it turned out Bob didn't like me, I found later. And I don't blame him, because I don't want to brag, but I was the worst type of alcoholic there is, the worst type of newcomer. I'll tell you, and I know that because I've had a couple of newcomers like that, and they're the kind of people, they walk into the room and say, hi, and you just wish you had a rifle. Here's hi. And I'll tell you what kind of person that is. That's a person who hangs around AA year after year, keeps drinking, keeps coming back, wants more attention, goes out and drinks again, wants more attention, and they won't listen to anything you tell. I already know all that, I know all that, and it makes you just crazy. But Bob tried to help me because he was a good man, and he would take me sometimes to meetings, he'd talk to me. And but he'd say, he was not very smart, I always felt. And I heard him say one night something that, I don't know if he's saying it to me or somebody else, but he said to somebody that even more stupid than usual. He said, as long as you think your problem is alcohol, you're going to die drunk. Jesus, Bob. Why do you say things like that? You're making me look bad. I was looking a little better. I'd shaved. By the time somebody shaved me, I had some hand-me-down clothes. I was looking pretty good. I said, you're making me look bad. He said, well, that's the case, kid. I said, Bob, I don't know what's wrong with you. The program, this AA thing, is for people whose problem is alcohol. He says, no, it isn't. If their problem is alcohol, they shouldn't even be in AA. They're taking up space. I said, Bob, you've been under them hot lights a little too long, I think. It's getting to you. He said, no. And he said, it isn't a problem with alcohol. He said, there's an answer to the alcohol problem. I said, what is it, Bob? He said, you stop drinking, and you clean up your act, and you do pretty well after that. That doesn't work. I've tried that 150 times. He said, that's right. That's because you don't have an alcohol problem, kid. Apparently you got my problem. I said, what the hell is that, Bob? Being an out-of-work actor? That made him mad. He said, no. It's something that sounds like alcohol, and it fools a lot of people. It's something called alcoholism. I said, oh, Jesus, Bob. Don't play word games with me. I look terrible, but I'm smarter than you, but anybody you know. Alcoholism, hooray, I'm cured. Shut up, he explained. And he gave me a long lecture. I tried to dull some of it out, but some of it got through and it changed my life. Not so much at the time, but I thought about it later. He said, kid, let me tell you the difference. An alcohol problem, as I say, you quit drinking, and that's all there is to it. There are people who do that. However, in this strange thing called alcoholism, this mind-consuming, perception-distorting, bodily-eroding thing called alcoholism, fatal thing, which unfortunately for you and me looks almost exactly the same as an alcohol problem. But in this alcoholism thing, if you stop drinking and clean up your act, it has no significant long-term effect on your life other than to gradually make it so uncomfortable you can't stand it. I said, Jesus, Bob. Nobody ever told me that before. They say if you stop drinking, that's the answer. I said, no, stopping drinking for people like us is not the answer. It makes it worse. I said, Jesus, Bob. Then why do these people drink alcohol? Why would they drink alcohol when alcohol is doing such terrible things to them? He says, they're not doing it because it's doing terrible things to them. He says, you say you've been around AA all this time? Do you know what alcoholics are? They're people who get an unnatural reaction to alcohol, right? Yeah, they set up a phenomenon of craving and they can't stop. And he said, nah, that's podium talk. What makes an alcoholic is this, kid. It's what alcohol does for you, not to you. And we don't even know it's special, but it's awful special. And he had a Coke, but he said, if I have a drink of booze, it almost instantly changes my perception of things around me. When I have a few drinks, it almost instantly changes my relationship to the world around me. Do you know of any, just in passing, do you know of any therapy that does that? Do you know of any therapy can take a suicidal guy walking down the street, going to kill himself, is it rope for the river? I'll have a drink and I'll do it. And he has a couple drinks, and 10 minutes later, down at the bar saying, are you with anyone, Granny? It changes things. It changes things. He says, when I have a few drinks, I get taller and straighter inside my gut, and they become less threatening and frightening to me. I said, Jesus, Bob, what's wrong with that? He says, because it isn't really happening, you idiot. It's in your head. But it seems that way. Then you drink too much, eventually you got to get sober again. I thought, okay, I understand that. But now you're sober again. Why would you drink now when you know it's going to go to hell? He says, that's the other part of the disease, kid. Because you never listen much. And he told me something that a guy gave me this old tape from when I was 3 years sober, and I listened to what he had told me, and I didn't talk about that for 35 years. Then I've been talking about it recently because it's as accurate as it could be. He said, kid, when people are born and they grow up, it's tough being a kid. It's tough being young. You have to deal with unknown things and problems and conflicts. You try to find solution to conflicts and try to find solution to problems, and you find what you can do and what you can't do and what you have to do to get what you want and how you stay out of trouble. He said that whole process is called maturing. And if you can do that and become a mature individual, you live rather comfortably. You can hold a job if you want to. You can get along with your family, get along with your kids, get along with the neighbors, go on square vacations and enjoy them. Do all sorts of things. He said, but this almost never happens to alcoholics. Why not, Bob? He says, because people like us have learned along the way when we have a problem or a conflict that's difficult, we can drink it away. We don't have to solve it. Here's to you, household finance. Here's to you, bitch. I never liked you anyway. Hey, Mr. Carlson, take your job and shove it up your nose. And it works, except what I don't realize is that I'm building a closet full of emotional situations, conditioned reflexes, like Dr. Pavlov's dog, full of childish emotions. We call them alcoholic emotions here because it sounds nicer. Yes, I guess my alcoholic emotions. What are alcoholic emotions? You hurt my feelings. I love you. I hate you. I'm going to run away. Let's get married. You know, on and on for hours. And it's all right except for one thing. The day comes sometimes for most people like us when I'm going to do something about it. Okay, I'm going to bear down now. I'm going to go back and get on my feet again and be something. Not going to do all that drinking. No more beefs, no more problems. Going to just do it. And never realize that for me, it is impossible. Because if I start doing it, sooner or later, someone will trigger those emotions. Someone will hurt my feelings. Someone will put me down. Someone will embarrass me, and I'll have to get even with them. And it starts to mount then. And when I was young, I used to quit jobs and punch people. But as I get older, I can't realize I can't do that. So I just keep it within me and seethe and get it. And it gets awful bad. In fact, scientists who study people like us say you get to a point sometimes where you literally must drink to preserve your sanity. And then I drink and away I go again. That's the other part of the program, kid. You can't stay sober. I said, Jesus, Bob, that's the story of my life. For year after year, I've really had some great jobs, and I blow them, and I've lost everything. I'm down. Guess I'm gone for good now, but I never heard anybody describe that before. He said, there's a name for people like you. I thought, uh-oh, because he swore a lot. What is it, Bob? He said, you're an alcoholic, kid. I said, my God, I'm an alcoholic. If that's what an alcoholic is, I am. I can't believe it. I said, Bob, why doesn't AA describe it the way you do instead of all this obsession of the mind and allergy of the body and all that crap that means nothing? He says, they do, kid. Look over there on the wall. See where it says 1? It asks you to admit you lost your power to control alcohol. Then there's a dash, which in the English language means end of thought, beginning of new thought. And you also have to admit that you're having a lot of problems sober. And he said something to me then, I'd say to anybody here who's doubting whether they're an alcoholic. He said, if either one of these things weren't there, you wouldn't be here. If you could drink, you'd be out drinking. If you could stay sober comfortably, you'd be somewhere else doing it comfortably. When you can't do either one, you're driven to rooms like this, and then the irony is your brain tries to find explanations to get you out of here so you can have a drink and relax. That's why people die. And that was in December of 1958, a long time ago. And my life didn't get better. I still had a terrible time. I had little crappy jobs, and somebody got fired off them. But the big problem was this. A big help was this. All my life, I've had a secret knowledge that deep down inside of me, I'm a weakling. I hate it. I hate it. I hate weaklings, and I hate myself for being a weakling. So my whole life has been out and on top. I'm not a weakling, for Christ's sake. Come on, let's go. Ha, ha, ha. But down deep, I know I'm a weakling. And strong people don't mind admitting they're weaklings because they say, yes, that's part of my personality. I'm a weakling. But weaklings can't admit it because that's all you got. I'm weak, and you don't like me, do you? And I found myself a couple times in my early days of sobriety just desperate. And I decided to confide in Bob about my weaknesses. And I was afraid he'd laugh and get rid of me. And he understood them and talked to me about them. He said, you're not so different. And this happened several times. And what happened, I began to get the strangest belief. I started to believe, my God, this guy seems to know how I feel. Which doesn't sound like much to most people, but you and I understand. I never had known anybody that I believed knew how I felt. My dad didn't, my doctor didn't, my psychiatrist didn't, my bosses didn't. Sometimes I thought guys in bars did, but it turned out they didn't. And what's so important about finding someone that you believe knows how you feel? And the reason is this. Everyone in this room, as an alcoholic at least, maybe non-alcoholics too, have had enough advice in their life to last them 10,000 years. People like us just get advice all the time from people. Don't want it. Passers-by, I think you ought to go to rehab. Leave me alone. And your bosses give you advice, your friends give you advice, and you have to say, gee, thanks, that's a good idea. But inside you just want to say, leave me alone. But if you can find someone that you believe knows how you feel, that advice becomes meaningful information. And you may take actions based on it that you never would for anybody else in the world. I remember standing at the Brentwood meeting, kind of upscale meeting, but I wasn't upscale, but it was an upscale meeting. Bob would take me there just about 8 blocks from where some years later O.J. Simpson did not kill his wife. And my sponsor said, see that woman over there? I said, yes, I see her. He said, I want you to apologize to her. Why should I? Monday night, someone told me you called her a bitch at the meeting. She is a bitch. Why do you think she's a bitch? She told her new girl to stay away from me. Well, she's right. You apologize. I can't think of a person in the world that would have told me that I wouldn't have said, to hell with you. I'm not going to apologize to that old bag so she can go around to all of me and say, I made him that Clancy knuckle under. What a weakling he is. I'm not going to do that at all. I'd rather be flogged around the fleet. To hell with her. But somebody that seemed to know how I feel told me to do it. And for the first time in my life, I think, Sorry I called you that name. You bitch. He wouldn't let me quit my job I wanted to quit. He made me go to meetings where they treated me bad. I said, they treat me like crap there, Bob. He said, they know something you don't know. Go. And little by little, he had me to change actions I never would have changed. And by the time I was 2 years sober, I finally got a job I held. It's the beginning writer in a big medical corporation in Los Angeles. And I still had no front. I had some guys that gave me some clothes, fairly decent, not very good. But I still had no front teeth. So when I went to work, I had to hold my lip like this. People just thought it had been burned in the fire. But I was determined, here's my chance to make my move, like Bill Wilson going up to Akron and getting that job. I want to make my move. And I was there about 3 days, and somebody hurt my feelings. I heard him say something about, that guy's got no teeth, isn't he ugly? Really? And I decided, I'll just give him a quick pop and get out of here. But I'd promised Bob that I'd call before I did anything, so I called. Hey, Bob. This son of a bitch. And he talked to me for about 15 minutes and talked me through it. He said, here's what I want you to do. And he gave me some stupid thing to do. I said, I'm not going to do that, Bob. He said, you are. Go do it. And I did it, and it worked, and it eased off. I bet you I must have called him 50 times in the first couple of years I was there. Just crazed. And he talked me through it. And little by little, I began to learn how to act in a corporate situation, although I'd been in many of them. By the time I was 5 years sober, I was director of advertising for that big medical corporation. Big shot. Got front teeth, smiled a lot. If any of you have lost teeth, let me give you some hope. Once you become spiritually pure, they grow back. When I was 7 years sober, another guy and I were brought into Hollywood, and we created something called Boss Radio. Became the #1 hard rock station in the world. We all wore shiny suits and said things like, what's coming on down, baby? I was 10 years sober. I was downtown doing public relations for an oil company. 15 years sober. I was a marketing director in Beverly Hills. Man, I was on a rocket. When I was 5 years sober, the same wife and all those children heard the money in my wallet all the way to Dallas, jumped out of their post office box, rushed to my side, attached themselves to me like starving chiggers. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another Catholic hit the street. Thank God somebody gave me a book on the rhythm system. We ended all that. And all my kids have grown up now. 3 of my daughters turned 17 last year in AA. Only one of them has turned out bad. She's become a judge. We so wanted a defense attorney, but no. She comes home at Christmas. She says, Daddy, remember when you used to get so upset when we were little girls and you make us go to our room? I said, sure, honey. She says, when you come to Albuquerque, New Mexico, I'm going to put you in a little room. I have no need to go to Albuquerque. And that last little child was a son, so I had a son again. And much to my chagrin, he turned out to be an alcoholic too, but he refuses to admit it. He's in his 40s now, and his wife has left him. He's about to lose a top job. He's a computer wizard. And he's been surrounded by alcoholics all of his life, and he knows all the answers. And it's so dreadful, because I've had some opportunities to help people throughout the world. I have 2 or 3 people in this room I sponsor. And I've got a lot of people I sponsor over the world. And I can't help the one kid I would like to help more than anybody in the world, my son. And that's why it's just frustrating for parents. It's nothing to do with me. But you watch that again and again, because to the kid, you're not talking to him about AA. That's just dad talking again. They'd want to hear it. Parents almost never can help out children. Children can never help parents because there's too many emotional things involved. And so with my own son, I have to hope that someday a miracle will happen. But it's really difficult. But anyway, my sponsor took me through the steps eventually, got me to do things, got me to believe in higher power. He said, can you believe in God? And I said, no, I can't, Bob. I can't return to God. He says, you don't have to return. He says, you come to believe in him. Well, I can't come to believe in him either. How's that? He says, can't you believe in AA? And I said, no, I can't, Bob. I like it better than I used to, but not much. He says, you think I'm doing better than you are? I said, of course you are. He said, congratulations. I'm your new higher power. And since I believed that he knew how I felt, I could accept that. And he taught me that what the second step means, return means insanity, means returning to live in reality without having to induce alcoholic psychosis. And I couldn't take the third step, turn my life over to God. I did something that helped me a great deal. I rewrote it in my mind. I'll try to do what Bob says. The result of that, over a period of time, my life changed little by little. That's all the steps I'm going to go through. That's why our topic here is 1, 2, 3, go. Because when I made those 3 steps and I had somebody I could believe in, my life changed. And sometime later, I was going to commit suicide, and he'd used my pain to get me to write an inventory. And he got me to make amends to my father, a man I hadn't talked to in 10 years. And I hated him. And I had to go back to Wisconsin and say, I was a bad kid. I'm sorry, Dad. And a lot of things. And my life changed significantly. Because I'll tell you something if you're new. A lot of people don't think about this. The purpose of AA is not to get drier and drier. My God, I've got 48 years of sobriety. I'd burst into flame up here. The purpose of AA, and I mean this with all my heart, the purpose of AA is to very slowly do what alcohol did fast. To little by little change my perception of reality. To little by little change my relationship to the world around me so I can live in it with some degree of comfort. To little by little make me taller and more self-contained inside my gut, and them less threatening and frightening to me. And I'll tell you that happens, and the only problem I have is that it changes your life, and sometimes it changes it more than you want it to. When I was 15 years sober, I told you, marketing director of Beverly Hills, doing great. And somehow in some fit of Alcoholics Anonymous insanity, or change of thought, I found myself leaving that job, and for the last 33 years, I've been running the mission on Skid Row that threw me out in 1958. And people say, why would you give up your great career to run that damn mission? And there's no good answer to that. Well, it was such a significant decrease in salary, I couldn't pass it up. But Monday morning, day and a half from now, I'll do something I'm sure none of you will do. I get up, I live out by the ocean in a very lovely part of Los Angeles, and I'll get in my car and I'll get the Santa Monica Freeway and go through Beverly Hills. My car still wants to get off there after, no, we're going downtown. And down to the worst part of town, Skid Row, rotten people. Park underneath our building, walk around our building and step over the bodies of men, women, and children who are all dying from alcoholism and drug addiction and insanity and abandonment. And I chat with them, the ones I know, and I go inside, and some other guys now, we spend all day trying to find ways to get these poor people to be willing to take actions they don't like, and they won't do it, and they die on the street, the very same street that I was dying on, and would have been dead a long time ago if I hadn't found somebody I believed knew how I felt. And I go home at night, and I take a walk around the building again, and say, good night, I say, good night, Jimmy. And I go home, and I seem to always feel better than I felt going down those elevators in Beverly Hills, popping my fingers. And I haven't become a wonderful man. I was so glad when I discovered in AA that Bill Wilson was not a wonderful man. And Dr. Bob was not a wonderful man. They were flawed men who used the program to rise above what they would have been. And I hope I can do that little by little. Because Alcoholics Anonymous is, as I said last night, and I want to say it again, and it's redundant, but it's something you should remember yourself if you're new. Alcoholics Anonymous consists of the same thing that's been happening in Alcoholics Anonymous since 1935. It is one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic to help him reduce his feelings of difference, at least enough so that his life will begin to change. Eventually, my sponsor died. I got another sponsor who got me into praying. Eventually, I came to believe in a God that he pointed out to me. He said, kid, you're not important enough for God to hate. Why don't you get off it? And I think that's true. And I came to believe that God loves me no more than you, no less than you. no more than the people on the street that I'm stepping over. Then if he loves us all the same, why is he letting those people die? Because they will not take actions they don't believe in. And that's what we're here for, to learn to take actions, whether we believe in them or not. Because action is the magic word here. All the philosophies, all the knowledge of the book, all of that is all very nice. But unless you take the actions, nothing changes. So I'm very happy to be here tonight. I'm glad to see so many of my old friends, glad to see new friends. I want to thank my friend here who gave me an hour-and-a-half trip through the traffic today in Bristol. Curse you. Yeah. And thank Sally, and thank our speakers, and thank all of you, and I hope we all have a good day ahead. Thanks.